We're here today with Punisher. Punisher, welcome to the podcast, bro.
Well, thank you for having me. This will be a fun and interesting time, I'm sure.
And so you have a legal name.
Yes.
Aaron Moore.
Aaron Moore.
And but we won't use that.
My parents admit to having me. Yes, I have a legal name.
So tell us first of all, before we get into your story, what tribe are you? What tribes
Yeah.
have you been a part of?
For the longest time, I was Tuckahoe Delta over at Hope. And then all the tribes moved off campus from Hope. And I kind of was looking for, another tribe. I was possibly participating in the tribes that were breaking away from Hope. But my wife was already in Women's Alliance over at Chapel in Lalu tribe. And she said, well, she's heard Chapel's been, because we were looking for another church. I was a little disappointed in what was going on with Hope. So she's like, well, I've heard wonderful things about Chapel, and they've got a good kids ministry because we have 2 children who are amazing. So let's check that out, and maybe you could check out one of the tribes over at Chapel. So I did end up trying out Hammer Tribe for a while, but then the child care thing wasn't working for us because we were going on the same night, which were both Mondays. So now I've been going to Delta Tribe at Chapel. And those nice. Every tribe I've been involved with, the guys are amazing. They're all awesome. So it's never a, well, I need to find another tribe. It's just basically like, does it work for our schedule?
Works for your schedule. That's what I tell guys all the time, man. Find the one that works for location and time. Yep. And it doesn't matter beyond that because they're all great. So you did Tuckahoe, you did Hammer, and now Delta.
Yeah.
How did you first hear about Men's Alliance? How did you get into this?
So my wife and I, we were at Hope. She was in a women's group called Thrive at Hope. Mm-hmm. And one of her friends in Thrive mentioned, because there weren't that many men's groups at Hope that I could find. There, they had like a breakfast every once in a while or something. But her friend said, well, my husband is involved in a group called Men's Alliance, and they meet here at Hope, but It's in the evenings. And it was Sensei, who is the husband.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah.
Sensei's wife.
Yep.
The Wife Network.
Yep.
So many guys in Men's Alliance, especially like thinking back to like the early days when there was only one tribe. So many guys in Men's Alliance are there because their wife was in a small group or some type of a Bible study or something with a Men's Alliance wife. So like wives saying, hey, your husband should check this group out. That's always been
it's part
essential.
Of what you touch on with the idea of isolation of men in the church. Guys don't find out things like Men's Alliance by themselves a lot of times. Some guys do because they're hungry for it, or sometimes they do it by accident like Ropes did, where he's like, hey, what's going on around a fire? And like just went over and talked to him, But yeah, I think a lot of times the wives tend to be key because they see the need for their husband to have fellowship, even if the husband doesn't, and it's a desperate need. And then they just go, well, I've got to find something for it. And then they hear about Men's Alliance and say, you need to connect with these guys and go. So that's what happened. And I talked with Sensei, and then couldn't go on the nights that he was going, I think, was the thing. And he referred me to Steve, Big Panda.
Yeah.
Radabaugh.
Yeah.
And then I started going
Big
to that
Panda.
tribe. Yeah.
Cool. If you're wondering, like what he's talking about, about the hope thing, we're actually gonna do a podcast on that. So if you're curious, like what's he talking about the hope thing, we're Big Panda is working on that right now on getting that podcast together.
Excellent.
So yeah, we're gonna put it all out there and talk about what happened there, and I think there's some good stuff to learn from there. But let's address the elephant in the room right now, and that's your jacket.
Yeah, I promised.
Tell us about this jacket.
Well, so I got, it's not like I had to be forced to do a podcast. I just didn't think I was that interesting to do a podcast. But a lot of guys in the MA chat groups, like for the Reading the Bible in a Year challenge and everything, like I would put comments and everything. And then guys would learn my story and stuff, and they were like, "You got to do a podcast." So the jacket relates because growing up in Southern California, I got involved with the sort of the wrong crews, the wrong crowd. Now, a lot of this speaks to what you talk about, like the importance for brethren and the importance for men to have a band of brothers, really. So I got involved with punk rock music, and a lot of it comes out of just being wounded, I think, by, because my parents were Christians. They took me to church. They were strong believers. They were very patient individuals. They were loving. But just feeling rejected or being rejected by certain, groups within the church and different things like that. And then dealing with some of the subculture in Southern California, got involved in punk rock. And then there's like a whole gang network. We call ourselves crews, but we shouldn't kid ourselves. It's like a gang network of, and we didn't do the nicest thing. So it's definitely like a gang. Got involved in that network and really got involved heavily. Was, to my mind, I declared myself to be an atheist. I think part of it, when you're really honest with yourself, a lot of times that's to get a reaction out of people. Some of it too comes from the rage that you feel against, people that you think have hurt you, or against God, like disappointment about things, about life, about what you think is suffering that's unfair, etc. So it's a lot of it comes from all sorts of things, but especially when you're a teenager, there's that sense and feeling of being angst-ridden, right? And it finds an outlet. So I had a name, I had a jacket like this. I think my parents will even remember that. I knew my parents knew kind of what was up, but they were so good and so patient and loving. They knew I would find out the truth eventually if I was honestly seeking. And my dad, because of his experience with God and unbelief, knew that you couldn't force belief. So they kind of let me, within reason, they let me do what I was doing. And then, anyways, this is kind of a redemption of that culture. So when I became a believer and stuff, I kind of rejected that old way of life. But I still, and we'll talk about this, I'm sure, in more detail. But it's kind of weird. Like, so you come out of a group, like a punk rock gang. Eventually I got tired with some of that and then got involved with like a skinhead crew. So I did become, a little bit more radical and crazy in that respect. You come out of a group like that and you become a believer. And I think one of the things you expect in the church is to be embraced and to have relationships and stuff like you did in your old community. The weird thing is, in the American church, because it's so individualistic and it's so hyper-focused on your own individual salvation, etc., it kind of heightens what you were talking about the isolation of men in the church among their, like they see their families and they hang out with their families. They go to church. They may know a few people at church to say hi to.
Yeah.
But beyond that, they don't really have a group of friends.
Would you say that the punk rock community you were in, they were good at creating that band of brothers?
Yeah, and
created that sense of belonging to a tribe?
It is. It's funny how I think that comes naturally to men. Like we can find friends, and I used to joke about this in tribe when they'd ask me about the jacket and I'd give my story. But I was like, in the days before I was a Christian, when I was involved in a lot of that stuff, we all had our things. We all knew our specialties, like the different things that someone was good at. It's like, hey, he's good with the Slim Jim. He can break open a car or whatever, like things like that. And you would be able to get together, I mean, for nefarious purposes, but it was easy to get together a group of guys to do all sorts of things.
Yeah.
And so, it just had this, it filled that void, I think, that every man, and to a certain extent woman, but every man desires to have that network.
Yeah.
That band of brothers, that group of friends that, you can rely on is the big thing. To be able to rely on someone, when something's going on in your life. And And also, it's odd, but just that relationship there, to be able to say, no matter what, these are the guys that accept me.
Did you have to earn? Well, first of all, what do they call it? Do they call it a nickname?
Yeah.
Or a name? Or
Yeah,
what do they call it?
Inevitably, when you're in the group, you have a name, like a nickname or something like that. I mean, a lot of times it's almost like a call sign. You don't necessarily want that nickname.
That's
it's
the
just
key
the one
part
they
of it.
assign you. Yeah.
Key part of it. You don't pick your own.
You don't pick your own.
No, that's not how it works anywhere.
Exactly. And so, especially when I had shaved my head, mine was Peanut because I kind of look like Mr. Peanut.
But what I wanted to ask is, did you have to earn that name? Or did they, were you trying to get in for a while before this name was given to you or bestowed on you? And then when you got it, it was kind of a moment?
Yeah, you don't, like with any group, you're not instantly in. You kind of have to show that you're part of the group. You show that you've got the same perspectives. You show that you share the same kind of values and stuff like that. And then after you're there for a while, that's when you never know when it's going to happen here. Like at least with, Men's Alliance tribes, it's like on the third time if you want to.
Not all tribes.
Not all. Oh, really?
Some of them are like, you'll get it when you get it.
Okay.
So we say at least three times.
At least 3 times, okay.
At least 3 times. So, I think that's a good way to do it. I think more tribes should probably lean towards the maybe your 4th.
Okay. Yeah, see, I thought it was the standard,
But yeah, most of them do it on the 3rd.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And in a similar way, there were expectations of like behaviors or things that you had to have done, to show you're a part of the group in order to really get that respect. But yeah, you never really knew when all of a sudden it was like, hey, Peanut, and then everybody just starts calling you that, and it's like, okay, I guess that. But the thing about that is, you knew that you were part of that group once you were assigned that name. So it does speak volumes, I think, to regardless of the kinds of behavior, regardless of your background and everything, there is a need to have that group, to have that band of brothers. So yeah, and they would, what would you like to do with that? Go on in that area, because I can keep going.
Well, I'm curious. Tell us a little bit more about this. You joined a skinhead group.
Yeah, and my parents thought that was interesting too. So not all, just to clarify, not all skinheads are racists. In fact, most traditional skinheads were not. So it was just an escalation of what you're involved in. So it's a little bit more radical than sort of the original, just, punk rock. There's a lot more emphasis on things like, even in the music and everything, more on violence and stuff. So it progressed with the way that my thinking was progressing. So when I was into the punk rock, I professed to be an atheist. At that point, I thought I was an anarchist, politically and philosophically. And
what would that have meant to you then? If somebody would have said, like, what does it mean to be an anarchist? Like, put that in the word
social context.
Yeah.
So at that particular point, it depends. There's all kinds of different anarchists, but I was reading, like the works of Joseph Pierre Proudhon and other more famous radical anarchists like, Kropotkin and Bakunin. And most of them are like, against traditional family values, against definitely vociferously against things like Christianity and against traditional Western values, against the family, against any kind of what they called illegitimate authority, right? And the only legitimate authority, of course, is what you want to do. Yeah, exactly. What you are about and what you want to do at a given moment. So there's a great book by a former atheist, and it sort of encapsulates a lot of what I think really goes on, but it's the brother of Christopher Hitchens, Peter Hitchens, and he has a book called Rage Against God. And he really talks about how he and his brother both got into atheism, which I think mirrors what I think most people in my experience is. It's like you want to do certain things, and so you look for the reason to reject the people that say you can't do those things.
Yeah.
And if you can do anything to make it sound legitimate by saying, well, that's an illegitimate authority, or there should be no gods, no masters, then you latch onto those things. And it's kind of like G.K. Chesterton talks about, you find the argument for the position you want to take. I'm paraphrasing, but...
Exactly right. Like, I always feel like most people who reject God, most men who reject God, are rejecting God so that they can... first be their own God, but the reason why they want to be their own God is it always is about sex.
Yep.
Like, men just want to be able to have sex with whoever they want, whenever they want, and not have any set of rules or authority or morals that tells them otherwise. But we can't say that at dinner parties. So we need a good reason that we can play, like, well, I just don't think there's good evidence for God. Or if God existed, why would bad things happen to good people? Right? Like, that's your card you're going to play at dinner parties because it sounds intellectual.
Right.
It sounds like you've thought this through. But that's not the real reason.
It sounds like you have a good reason.
The real reason is you just want to have sex with whoever you want, whenever you want.
Well, and for me, for my position, so the funny thing is I was still a virgin when I got married. So mine wasn't the sex thing, but there were things I did want to do, and a lot of that was sort of destructive. So I don't know if you've ever read Faust, but the devil character in Faust, Mephistopheles, he has this line where he says he's impugning God for creating such a terrible world, right? Because there's so much suffering. So his argument is basically, I'm going to destroy it because it doesn't deserve to exist, right? He says the line like, everything that exists deserves to perish because there's too much suffering, which is funny. So it's like
very ironic.
It's like, but if you turn that into a political view, all you do is like compound the suffering.
That's right.
So
because there's so much suffering,
I'm going to create.
I need to destroy everything. Well, your statement about it really being all about you, right? Ultimately, the only legitimate authority is yourself. That just reminded me so much of Satanism, right? And a lot of people think that Satanism is all about worshiping Satan. Actually, Satanism, if you go to their website, by the way, you should go to the, I don't remember its website address. It's like churchofsatan.com. The official, the Church of Satan website, started by Anton LaVey. All their commandments, all their guides, it's all about do whatever makes you happy. Like, you should indulge yourself in any pleasure that makes you happy. And if somebody wrongs you, you should get revenge. And these are the tenets of Satanism. And as you read these, you're realizing, like, these are basically just scratching every human itch. Right? Like, whereas, like, Jesus Christ says, deny yourself, take up your cross. Satanism, or anarchist, really says, put down your cross and please yourself.
And do what you want. It's odd that you say that because, one of the times that I started to really think about it and it got really weird was with the radical left. A lot of what you see. So in the groups I was talking about, like the gangs, most people would know them now in the news as what's classified as Antifa. So they call them like anarchist black blocs or whatever to talk about them.
Anarchist
black blocs.
Black blocs.
Yeah. So
I hadn't heard that yet.
Yeah, but Antifa is what's usually referred to on the news. Or anti-fascist, they call themselves, I guess. But it's all grouped together. There's no network really, other than like a network on the internet. Like people would say, like, they're all working together, conspiring. I'm like, to the extent that they all want to just destroy
everything,
Western society, I guess they're working together, but they're not really. They're collaborating. But yeah, when I was getting involved with some of those groups, you run into some weird like out and out pagans, out and out like Satanists, people would be surprised at the connection between like radical feminism and paganism, the LGBT movement and paganism, and a rejection, because the idea is a rejection of Christianity and traditional Western values to the extreme.
Yeah, so, say that again. The rejection of
Christianity and the traditional Western values.
Christianity and traditional Western values. Because that seems like the umbrella that a lot of various movements could fit underneath, right? Like you just said.
Yeah.
Christianity and traditional Western values, that would go against, LGBTQ, Antifa, radical left, Satanist.
Yeah.
Right. It's like, hey, what do you mean by paganist, by the way? What's a pagan?
Well, so for me, and this goes into, I think, what really is at the heart of atheism, like modern atheist culture. There's a pretense at scientific thinking. Mm-hmm. And obviously, there's scientific evidence for and against. Like, so the weird thing is, though, I don't know if you've ever read David Berlinski, but he's excellent. But he talks about scientific pretensions for atheism. Mm-hmm. And then the idea that when they say, well, I'm an atheist because the science points there, it's like, well, the science also points towards creation, and probably more heavily so. In the early medieval period...
That's that dinner party card.
Yep. Well, in the early medieval period, it was interesting because there was most of the scientists were, and this is where the history teacher and stuff in me comes out. Most of the scientists were actually members of the church. They were monks.
Yeah.
There's a book by Scott Rand called The Age of Illumination, where he talks about all the scientific discoveries in the so-called Dark Ages, which is a pejorative term given by the Enlightenment to that period.
Yes. Isn't that interesting?
Yeah. But in 1417, an Enlightenment thinker, or what would be inspired by Enlightenment thinker, rediscovered Lucretius's poem on the nature of things. And Lucretius was an Epicurean, which the Epicureans essentially what they said was, do what you want,
pleasure.
Hedonistic pleasure. But also in that on the nature of things, he said, well, there's no way to know whether or not there's gods. And if there are gods, they're not worth worshiping, and they're distant. They're far off. And then in the Enlightenment period, with that rediscovery of Lucretius, you have people like Voltaire who basically just say, that's right. So because of science, all we can know is a material world. And because of science, so they brought a pagan philosophy into and shaped the scientific culture of the Enlightenment by just reintroducing paganism. There wasn't a conflict between Christianity and science.
Yeah. That's something so important.
Yeah.
We should do a whole podcast on that.
There's an excellent, I got to stop recommending books. There's an excellent book called Of Popes and Unicorns out of Oxford University Press that basically traces that history of science where they say the conflict thesis between science and religion has an origin, and it's written by a couple of guys in the 1800s in the United States. What
is the time period? I would have to Google this, but you might be a human Google. What is the time period that is traditionally referred to as the Dark Ages? What is the Dark Ages?
Well, the fall of Rome. So after the fall of Rome up to, and this is, again, it's a pejorative given by the Enlightenment. Yeah. So up to the beginnings of the Enlightenment, because they're like, well, we're the enlightened ones. We're ending the Dark Ages. So, you have the end of Rome in around the, I'm trying to remember the exact years for something, but in the end of essentially the 5th century, with total collapse, and like you have the breakup there, because it didn't happen right away, like there were periods of degradation and declension, and then up to, so they ignore any of the progress, any of the, the development. And again,
well, that's where I was going. That's what I wanted to look at is the development during these so-called Dark Ages, right? When would they say the Enlightenment began?
Oh, you're probably looking at like the 16th century.
Okay.
So that, hundreds of years, basically.
So, a little over 1,000 years,
Yeah. Well, and
from about the 5th century to the 16th.
What they ignore, essentially, is all of the developments of what we take for granted in Western culture, like the development of hospitals. That was Christian in its origin. So taking care of the sick. Most of the pagan people in the Roman centers, when a plague came through, if they were wealthy enough, they ran, they fled the cities. But the odd thing about Christians was they went in to the cities to take care of those that were dying of the plague. And if you took care of them, they found out you actually had a better incidence or being able to survive. So then they started creating buildings, facilities to house and take care of people in hospitals. Christians, since the advent of Christianity, started taking in children that were exposed by Roman pagan households. So people don't really realize it because they'll say, these Enlightenment guys and the atheist guys, they'll say, well, we hearken back to Rome and Greece and stuff. But if you actually lived in Rome and Greece, most of our values would be very alien. So there's even instances of letters by husbands writing back to their wives, saying like, hey, when you have the baby, it's papyrus, so it's recorded. When you have the baby, if it's a boy, keep it. If it's a girl, throw it out. And it's a loving husband writing a loving letter home to the wife. But so, pagan families would expose their children, and then Christians would come and take the children and take care of them. And then that's the development of orphanages. Now I'm being really succinct because we don't have time to do the history lesson on everything. But most of what we value now in the West, traditional Western values, have their origins in Christianity.
Yeah. Hospitals, orphanages, also universities. All these things not only came about by Christians, but came about during the so-called Dark Ages. Right. So amazing. So let's go back to.
See, this is my problem.
This is great.
I jump around.
No, I'm the same way. So this is great. So let's go back to your story. So you've progressed from punk rock gang to more violence and skinhead group.
Well, yeah, and with that, that's like when I was rejecting the anarchism because I was like, I was upset. And I saw that it was actually hypocritical, most of the things, and most people were just basically self-serving. So then you become, well, I mean, naturally, but someone who reads and someone who's like me just is like, well, nihilism. All right, nothing matters, nothing's valuable, nothing is important. And then skinhead becomes like the next thing because it's like, okay, well, I can do whatever I want. I can be.
Oh, that came after it?
Yeah.
I would have thought nihilism came at the end. But that's just my guessing.
Yeah, well, that's what I'm saying. Like nihilism comes after my anarchist sort of.
Okay. Yeah, nihilism to me sounds like an anarchist who's exhausted.
Yep. That's what I mean. So like,
and you're giving up. You're like, you know what?
Yeah.
Nothing.
Exactly. Well, and that's where I was essentially. And then in that process, I mean, you get exhausted. You really do, because nihilism isn't a tenable philosophy. It's not something you can sustain over a period of time. And there's an intimate and I think innate longing for meaning and for value and for love. So you get exhausted, and if you're not drinking too much, like, because some people turn to the alcohol and drugs and stuff like that to basically hold on to their nihilism and dull the pain of what I think human existence and experience really brings to the fore. Because I had experience with a lot of people doing that too. Which, by the way, if anyone's in there with Tribe, if I ever go with you somewhere like to a pub or anything, I won't drink, but that's why, because I just too much experience with alcohol and other stuff. Not judgmental. Other people can drink as they want, like Paul says, drink and be thankful and do whatever you do unto the Lord.
Yeah.
But anyways, so if you're not inebriated, I think ultimately you have to come to the conclusion that there's something more. Or the third option, I guess, is, so inebriation, conclusion there's something more, or I've seen other people basically just choose the chicken way out and commit suicide. But ultimately, I think that's what God wants. He won't let you rest. He's created us in a way that is too painful to live without him and too painful to live without meaningful connection. So while I was going through that period, I was listening to my parents a little more, just the things that they were talking about. Of course, on the outside, everything was fine, and I didn't really need what they had, but on the inside, I was taking note, really, of of what they were doing. And my parents were an excellent example, and my wife will say that as well, of loving Christians, like loving wonderful Christians. And then in that same time frame, I started just hanging out with some other people through work. There was a guy, I worked at Blockbuster Video, and one of the managers there was this guy named Dan, and he was also a friend who was in a band. I didn't really know much about their band. But he was a nice guy, kind of different, very different from most of the people I hung out with regularly, but we could talk about music because we were talking about different things like death metal, punk, different things like that. And he knew most of the bands I would talk about. But again, he was very different. And so eventually I just kind of wondered, I'm like, well, what's different about you? Why are you so chipper? Why are you so happy? Why are you so hopeful? Why doesn't your existence seem to oppress you on a daily basis? And I think I maybe even asked it that way or something, and he just said, well, I think I would have to say it's my relationship with Jesus Christ. And I was like, oh, damn.
Amen. Has money gotten in the way of how God can use you? Let me tell you about Tom Love, certified financial planner with the Main Street Group. Tom Love from Tuckahoe Tribe, a.k.a. Doc, can absolutely get you squared away with your finances. My wife and I use Doc to handle our personal finances, and his team is second to none. Tom is a certified financial planner. He's a Dave Ramsey SmartVestor Pro. He's been ranked top 40 under 40. He's been ranked number 2 in Richmond Times-Dispatch. He's been featured in the Wall Street Journal. And make sure you mention Men's Alliance whenever you reach out to Doc. He gives Men's Alliance, Tip of the Spear Ministries, a portion of the proceeds when you invest through him. He's a fee-only fiduciary, which means he doesn't make money unless you make money. So check out Tom Love at the Main Street Group.
You're one of those undercover guys, you know what I mean? I'm like, so...
You're like, I thought you were cool.
Yeah, exactly. At that moment, I was kind of thinking things like that. And
but the great thing is you saw something different about him.
Oh, yeah.
Right? And you're like, you even said, why are you so hopeful?
Yeah, yeah.
Right? I think hope in itself is a distinctly Christian quality.
It is.
Of the hope that we have should be different from the world around us. It should be something, that sets us apart.
Yeah. And I have to say, my parents had that too, but there's something about when you're a kid.
Yeah.
Like you I think Mark Twain said it, where he said, like, when I was 18, my dad was a fool. Yeah. And when I became 22, I realized how much I should, how foolish I was becoming, essentially.
Yeah. I couldn't believe how much smarter he got in those 6 years.
Yeah. Those 6 years, yeah.
It was great.
But I mean, so there wasn't anything wrong with their witness. It's just the parent-child dynamic.
Yeah.
I think you know everything.
But I tell one of my kids something 50 times. Mm-hmm. But then, one of my buddies tells them one time. And they're like, Dad, you wouldn't believe what he said. And I'm like, great.
Yeah, that sounds familiar.
It's got to come from somebody else, basically.
Yeah. Well, and so but aside from Dan, there was other friends that I'd had in high school. They were all kind of friends together and stuff. And working with Dan... like all of a sudden he's telling me he's a Christian, and I'm like, well, wait a minute. So, okay. So these other guys, this guy Eric that I was hanging out with, and this guy Corey, and this guy Mike, I'm like, so are they all Christians? He's like, yeah, and then the rest of the guys that are in his band, I'm like, he's like, by the way, we're a Christian band. And I was like, okay, because I'd heard them before. I'm like, you don't sound what I would expect from a Christian band, because they were pretty hardcore, pretty crazy. I think isn't there like a Men's Alliance band?
Well, we had them on. Right. Yeah, I would say they are MA adjacent.
I didn't, but I mean, that where it's like,
they're a Christian metal band that brings it.
Yeah, and so it was a similar kind of experience where I was like, okay, well, these guys are interesting. And they've got the energy and the music that I like and things like that, but it seems like they have more hope. So, long story short, that sounds like, never mind. I got invited to this Bible study. I didn't know it was a Bible study. It was just a get together by Dan. We get together.
Okay,
we
he
hang out.
invites you over.
Yeah, he invites over to his house.
Yeah.
It's the Istra house. That's the band's name, was Istra. And
like ISTRA.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah. And so he's like, yeah, we have these get-togethers on Wednesday. We'll have some drinks. We chat. We talk about things that are important, etc. Again, undercover. But then I get there and I'm like, oh, there's Bibles and things like that. So I'm like, okay. But it was fascinating, and it was interesting to talk about and like hear where they were bringing in their own personal experiences, and where they, in sort of the hardcore radical atheist circles, they always talk about this dusty relic, right? It's ancient writings, it's scribblings, it's, things that are outdated, but no one ever bothers to pick it up and read it, right? And here it was kind of interesting because they were applying principles they were taking from this book and learning how to live, and addressing concerns that each other had, and being able to speak to each other's lives in and through, and using that book that everybody rejects as being this ancient dusty relic. And just seeing that and seeing their joy. By the way, also my wife was at one of them.
Okay.
So I got to meet her, and the Lord's not above using physical attraction in order to draw you into. I'm just kidding. But my wife is beautiful, and she did stick out, and she was a very unique individual as well. And her hope and her faith and her joy is another thing that drew me closer to the Lord. But yeah, I think ultimately running into this group and then meeting my wife, and it was interesting because I was supposed to go to a concert, a Skinhead concert, with a group of my old friends shortly thereafter. And then my wife was also going to go see some other band. We were just friends at the time. And I was so attracted to her that I was like, you know what? I'm liking hanging out with these people. And this girl's different. She's cool. She's way different from the girls that I'm familiar with, the crews I was hanging out with. One, she had a lot of self-respect, which was interesting. And so I just said, you know what? I'm going to go to this concert with her. And I gave my tickets to someone else. Lo and behold, it's interesting, though, it worked out like that God was protecting me, because at that concert, there was like a big riot. They had called the police in to and they arrested a bunch of people. A bunch of people got maimed, and I think a couple of people got killed even at the show. So I didn't end up attending that one. Which was good, because I wouldn't have.
Yeah.
But anyway, so then
it's always interesting, those small choices we make
and how the Lord uses them. I could have chosen to go and reject or just say, I don't want to deal with this. And then I would have either been arrested or probably killed or injured at least or something. But then, yeah, so then we started developing a relationship more with my wife. At that point, I had become an intellectual believer in faith. Yeah, I had talked with Dan and them, and I'd become a believer. And, this went over a period of months. And then I started really hanging out with my wife more, and she and I became friends, and I really liked her. But I was at that point where I couldn't get up the courage to ask for a phone number to do the date thing. But we kept seeing each other. But I was an intellectual. I'll say there's a distinction between being someone who assents to the intellectual truth of Christianity and being a full follower. Because I wasn't there yet. But I was an intellectual believer. I believed in the truth of Christianity because the evidence is overwhelming. If you actually look at the evidence, like the reliability of the New Testament in relation to historical documents, the scientific evidence that points towards the fact that there's a creator over and against a random accident, what we were just talking about, the cultural impact evidence, just the evidence of changed and transformed lives, which I think is the apologetics of the Holy Spirit, just seeing how, all of that basically points to the reality, the way the world was transformed by 12 men who should have died nameless. I mean, they were fishermen in a backwoods in the Roman Empire that no one should have known about. But those 12 men, and then Paul, transform the entire Western world, and doing that transform the whole world, because most of the world is now operating in reaction to Christianity. I mean, they have to take a stance on it one way or another, even if you're in a country with radical Islam. But just seeing the truth of it, I mean, you have to just say, okay, it's true. But there's a difference between doing that and actually saying Jesus is the Lord of my life and having a relationship with him and talking
That's right.
to him
There's
regularly.
a big difference.
Yeah.
Even Satan knows intellectually that Jesus Christ is God and that he rose from the dead.
Yep. And James says, the demons know and they shudder.
Yeah. I think, the word believe, I think it's better translated as trust. Because we can believe a lot of things intellectually that we don't necessarily put our trust in.
Right.
And I think that's a better way, to help people understand the difference between the intellectual and the volitional.
Yeah.
Is it's not just a belief that, it's a belief in.
Yeah.
Right.
Well, and that's what I see as the difference too, like between where I was and where my wife was at the time. So she had an intimate relationship with Jesus. She talked to him regularly, and still does. So then, as I'm developing and stuff, and I believe, like I said, it's intellectual assent. Christianity is true. And I was very interested in apologetics because that helped with the scaffolding. Like I did study that heavily. I even went to seminary for a long period. I went for about 1.5 years and got my master's. After that, right when I was finishing up my master's, my wife had some health issues. And she can always talk about her story if she really wants to. She wrote a book about it, but it's pretty interesting. But she had some health issues that persist to this day without taking medication. She takes the medication. But in that, I saw her lean into her faith in a way that I couldn't. So I had this intellectual belief, but she had the full-on relationship with Jesus. And only because of that was she able to survive the hell of the different hospitals that she had to go to. And I saw her lean into it in and throughout all of the difficult times in our lives. So we went through some difficult periods, even in our marriage, a lot of it because of just my brain, the way I wired myself by being an atheist and reading the different things that I read. So it spilled into Christianity even. So when I was in seminary, things I would find was like, oh, this makes sense to me. So I'd find like the liberation theologians, and it's like, oh, this makes sense because you're using Karl Marx, but in terms of Christian theology, right? And there had to be a healing process, I think, which only comes with the transformation of actually knowing Jesus relationally, being able to know him as a person and having the Holy Spirit dwell within you. So the reason I bring up my wife's difficulties, and like I said, she can give details if she feels comfortable and wants to. She's written a wonderful book about it, but it's hard to read some parts of it for me because I experienced it. There's something different about seeing the relational truth of Christianity and seeing someone who's transformed. And I saw that in those people. But when you have an intimate relationship with someone like your wife or someone that's a good friend or something, and they show you how they love Jesus in and through the difficulties and in and through the pain, that's, I think, what really attests to the truth of Christianity, is like her joy was not found in her situation. She could still be thankful. And I think of the book of Job when I think of my wife and all the things she went through, but it's like she was able to still, like, even in the midst of, like, on the pile of the ash heap, still be able to say, like, well, I don't know why I'm going through this, but I trust God and I love him and I know he's good.
Yeah.
And seeing that made me realize I didn't have it. And so there was a men's Bible study I was going to at a Calvary chapel. And the pastor, it was a Wednesday night, and the pastor was just talking about the biography, I think, of, why his name is eluding me at the moment. Sinners in the Hands of Jonathan Edwards.
Yeah.
Sinners in the Hands of Angry God. He was just talking about his biography and about his belief and about his life. And for whatever reason, in that moment, Jesus decided to speak into my life, and he was like talking to me saying like, you don't have what these guys have. You don't have a relationship with me. And I'm not prone to like visions or like, ecstatic experiences, but I definitely had a very real sense of Jesus's presence and of him speaking into my heart and saying like, you don't believe in me like these guys do. You don't have a relationship with me like these guys do. And so at the end of that, I basically went up there and had to do the embarrassed thing of say, I thought I was a believer for a long time. I even went to seminary and pursued a master's in apologetics, but I don't think I'm a believer. And I prayed with the pastor and I became a believer at that point. It's never been the same since. I mean, I know my wife's probably would be able to say there's a significant difference between our relationship and even in me now since then. And then from that point, I just see the Lord coming through for us in every single situation. Again, you're not promised a life without difficulty, but it's different going through difficulty with the Lord. So, I mean, we still had to deal with things associated with her health issues.
Yeah. That's right. It doesn't mean your life's going to be easy. It means you're going to have somebody to help you through it.
Exactly.
Yeah.
And we went through that, and then, my son was diagnosed with autism, and that was another one of those difficulties that we kind of leaned on the Lord through. And the way we came to Virginia was definitely a Holy Spirit thing. So we were in California. We were looking for, I was having a rough time with my job anyways, but we were looking for opportunities. The state, it was in the middle of COVID. We're trying to get my son services to help with his autism. He needed early intervention. He needed speech therapy. He needed occupational therapy. He needed ABA. And California has all those things, but they were so inundated with the cases, and there weren't enough caseworkers, and it was in the middle of COVID that when I asked my colleagues at because I was working in the public sphere, I asked my colleagues at other, like the regional independent living centers, how long until he gets seen for services? And they said it's about 3 years. So I'm like, that's we can't wait for that.
Yeah.
So we started looking into and researching where he could get services. And Virginia, for whatever reason, came up as like one of the states where you can get seen and he has, by the way, get seen and get the services. And we prayed about it. A job opportunity opened up for us to move to Virginia. And then we would have to basically sell a house and purchase a house. In order to get this job, I'd have to sell a house and purchase a house and move us here within a month. So I'm like, okay, well, if this is going to happen, the Lord's the only one that can make that happen with this kind of a market and in the middle of COVID. And it did. He got us here. We got it. Not only did we get a house, but we got a house right next to the best elementary school in North Chesterfield district for special needs, for special education. And he's just thrived there. And I just see, blessing upon blessing, really. And again, there's difficulties still, like, so, trying to afford different things like the therapies and other things like that. But he, has always made ways for things to happen and for provision to be there. My parents help, and there's all sorts of stuff going on.
That's incredible, man. Relating, a little bit of my story with yours, I also grew up in a Christian home, and if you'd have asked me in my 20s and early 30s if I were a Christian, I definitely would have said yes.
Yeah.
Like, oh yeah, totally. But I would say that it was just the intellectual part of, I believe that all this is true.
Right.
Right. And then zero effect on my life. Right. And so there's this difference, and I think you've felt it and experienced it, and I've felt it and experienced it. But I think the majority of Americans who claim to be Christians, I would say they are not born again.
Right.
I think it's a cultural believe that, right? That people just say, but when you, and I use the phrase going all in.
Yeah.
Right? When you go all in, when you actually give your life to Jesus and make him Lord of your life. Say you're in charge. Basically, that's what it means.
That's the hardest part.
No longer my will, but yours, right? Kind of just total surrender. That's when everything changes.
Yeah.
That's the moment that your life actually changes, and you realize that's what being born again is. That's what it means to make Christ the Lord of your life. And it's not a work. It's not something you have to do. It's a change of mind.
Speaking to that, I mean, you touched on something that I think is definitely important, but the idea of, so people talk about repentance. Repentance, like the Greek word for it is metanoia, and it just means changing your mind. Like turning around is essentially what it is in Greek. And I think one of the things I struggled with the most after becoming a Christian, giving the Lord full control and full reign of my life, was guilt and shame over all of the garbage. But one of the things he did, like you said, it's not a work. One of the things he did was say, look, it's never been about your performance. If it was about performance, no one deserved it. That's why I gave the Sermon on the Mount, right? Because it's like everybody had to feel convicted in the Sermon on the Mount. Like no one left the Sermon on the Mount going like, I'm okay.
I'm doing well.
Yeah, I'm doing okay. Like especially when he goes like, even if you've committed
it's the thought life.
lust. Yeah, even if you've got lust in your life, you've committed adultery. It's like, at that point, I think every guy was like, okay, yeah. But I think he spoke into my heart and basically said, you need to let things go because you're never going to be able to move forward and really embrace this life and really do the radical things I want you to do. He's like, you had that energy sort of for radical destruction, and I want you to apply that now for the creation of the kingdom. And I think he did that like with people like Paul.
Absolutely.
Well, you know,
I love that. I love that concept.
Yeah.
It's like however God made you, he wants you to use that for him. Right? He's not going to try to change the way he made you. He's going to try to channel it in a positive direction now.
Right, exactly. But I think one thing I would say to people who have a past is like if you're struggling with shame or guilt, Jesus is trying to tell you like it's never been about your performance. You can let go of that and you can move forward in what he's created and designed you to be. And I think that's one of the things that cripples a lot of Christians is the shame and the regret. And I'm not saying you shouldn't be sorry for certain things, but at the same time, I think, you know, we can tend to wallow in our shame. And I think we would do more for the kingdom if we were kind of more warrior mindset and say like, you know, like, I mean, I don't say be disrespectful, but basically be like Conan where it's like, you know, like
acknowledge it and now get up and keep moving forward.
Yeah.
I want to, you mentioned the Greek word for repentance, and we've been talking in Men's Alliance, we've been talking heavily for the past several weeks about Catholicism.
Oh, yeah.
And we did a podcast with Keith Nestor, who went from Protestant to Catholic. And it
was a good podcast.
Yeah, thanks. And then we've done podcasts in the past about being raised Catholic and coming. So you began touching right there on what was really the crux of the entire Protestant Reformation, is how the word
repentance,
metanoia is translated.
Yeah.
And if it's translated change of mind,
the
way Protestants translate it, or do penance.
Do penance, yeah, exactly.
Right? The way the Catholic Church translated it, do penance, do something.
Yeah.
Right? So now to repent means you got to go do these things, which is works.
Yep.
Now there's something you have to do, right? Which is especially troublesome when doing penance involves paying money, right? Paying penance, and that's the way you repent is you give us this money, and so because you brought this up, I just wanted to do this quick aside to this topic that it's not stop sinning,
right?
In order to be saved, it's because there's no power to stop sinning. None of us could stop sinning without Christ. Right. And so that's like putting the cart before the horse. We don't stop sinning and become followers of Jesus. You become a follower of Jesus by deciding in your mind that you're going to be.
Yeah.
And then the process over time, over years, hopefully we are sinning less and less as we work on this process. But such a valuable point that you brought up, coming from whatever backgrounds we do.
It's how we deal with our baggage.
Yeah.
You know, like the only weapon the enemy has once you become a Christian is shame and guilt and fear. But it's like he can't do anything to you. He just has to kind of paralyze you or try and keep you from being effective for the kingdom.
That's right. Just keep you on the sideline. And hey, your past disqualifies you.
Yeah. Even if you're in a tribe, don't lead a Devo or anything like that, because they'll ask questions about your life, and then it's going to come out, and then they're going to lose respect for you.
Leading a Devo is only for other people.
Yeah, exactly.
Not for you. You stay quiet.
Yeah, exactly.
That's the lie we have to reject.
Yep. And two, there's just that, I don't know what it is, and I think Ropes even talked about it a little bit on there, but it's that gnawing guilt over things that we've done. And like, if you think about it, it's a form of self-righteousness, because we're holding on to it and we're saying to Jesus, what you did on the cross is not adequate to take care of what I did. It's not adequate to cover the how bad I was.
Yeah, you don't know how bad I was.
You don't know how bad
I was so much worse.
Yeah, and if we do that, I think part of what Jesus wants us to know is if we do that, it's a form of self-righteousness. So there's the Pharisees who are self-righteous saying, look how good I am. And there's the self-righteousness saying, like, look how bad I am, and you can't do anything to really change or cover it.
Man.
And either way, it's rejecting the righteousness gift that Jesus has given us. And I love, one of my favorite verses is essentially, you are the righteousness of God in Christ. You know, Paul's saying you've been given, it's not about your works, like you said, you've been given righteousness.
Yeah.
He took your place. And if anyone had baggage, I mean, I always think of Paul.
Sure.
Whenever I'm tempted to feel shame about what I did in the past, I always think like, well, Paul used to kill people in the church.
That's
Paul
right.
Used to be a terrorist against the church.
I'm so thankful God used him.
Yeah.
Right now we all have this example.
Well, I mean, when you think about most of the writers of Scripture, it's like Moses murdered an Egyptian. David did lots of things, but especially with, Bathsheba and then having Uriah killed. I can't think of anyone in Scripture who doesn't have something. And I think God did that for a reason. To say, like, no one's disqualified. You can all participate in my kingdom, but you have to accept me as your Lord and Savior first.
That's right.
Yeah.
Hey, I wanted to ask you, when you were an atheist, if you were talking to a Christian, what would have been your best argument for atheism?
It's the one they always use. It's the problem of suffering. That's why I brought up the
how would you have worded it? How would you have said it? Give us your best punk rock, atheist, anarchist argument.
Well, if you want to bring punk rock into it, there's actually there was a song that I loved by the band Bad Religion, and by the way, their logo was a cross crossed out. So it's like a black cross with the Ghostbusters no through it, and their famous song, I think that part of it was for shock value, and I won't say the expletive that's in the title, but it was F Armageddon, This Is Hell. And the whole album title was How Could Hell Be Any Worse? So this is the things I'm consuming. But basically it's like there's so much suffering in the world that whoever created it has to be guilty of the worst crime. You know what I mean? It's like there's no way to justify the amount of suffering that's in the current level of existence. So God, if he's there, he must be malevolent, not benevolent. And because of that, most people then, as an atheist, then they say like, well, but that just proves that there isn't a God. That just proves that nature is, and that, nature is red in tooth and claw, and it's just suffering, and it's just DNA dancing to its music. It is what it is, and we all die, right? So the funny thing about that, though, and Dan hit me with this, that guy, the friend of mine, I was telling him this, and I was trying to kind of work my way into rejecting his Christianity because it was too comfortable. Atheism was too comfortable at this point.
Yeah.
And I was giving him that argument, and he was like, the problem with your argument. I'm like, well, what's the problem with my argument? And he was like, why should we be at all disturbed by suffering if we don't have the inherent feeling that it should be otherwise? And I'm like, what do you mean by that? Unpack that. And he was like, why do we feel that there's an injustice, that there's suffering? Why would we even have it as a problem? Why is it a problem that there's a problem of pain if we didn't anticipate and there's something in our souls that doesn't expect that it should be otherwise? Like, why is pain a problem? Like, why do you accuse God of injustice if there's so much suffering? If suffering just is what it is, why would we even come up with this idea that it's a problem? And he was like, it's only a problem because you expect a certain amount of justice in the world. And then he went down that trail where he's leading me down the C.S. Lewis trail where he's like, but justice points towards something.
Why would we call a line crooked if we didn't have some idea in our mind of a line that is straight?
Yeah.
I think one of the best arguments in this category is how do you define evil in a world that is here only by random mutation and natural selection as survival of the fittest? Why on earth would you call it evil when a child dies? Why is that evil? That's normal. That's to be expected. But yet we all know there's something evil about it. Why is that?
Or to use the example of history's favorite whipping boys, like, why are the Nazis bad? I mean, they're just pursuing what you say is essentially the scientific doctrine of survival of the fittest, and the strong survive because they have might.
That's exactly right. And that's also a tremendous example for those who say that morality is a social construct that, is pretty much the majority votes on. Well, that's a group that was voted into office.
Yep.
Right? So how can you, in your country, on the other side of the ocean, morally judge that country?
Yep.
Right? By what standard are we saying the Nazis were evil?
Right.
There must be a standard outside of both of our countries. In fact, outside of our planet.
Right.
So that was your best argument as the atheist, and then you've already. I was going to have you debunk it, and you already did that. Well, what do you find now as a Christian? What's your best argument, if you will, or explanation for the existence of God? What do you believe now is the most compelling case for God?
If we say just the existence of God generally, without getting into Christianity,
correct.
I would say just looking at the created order, and I think most scientists agree. Like when you read. So I'm not talking about the new atheists like Dawkins and them. When they talk about science, they really don't. It's more like proselytizing. They don't actually get into the scientific method and talk about here's how science disproves God. They just make fun of people.
Yeah.
When you look at and read real science, when you read real scientific research, even from agnostics like Thomas Nagel, who's not a believer, but he has a book called Mind and Cosmos. And I think the subtitle is Human Consciousness and Why the Neo-Darwinist Materialist Construct of the Universe is Almost Certainly Wrong. He's basically saying, with something like human consciousness in the universe, we can't explain it just by reference to material reality. He's like, we don't know what it is. I mean, as Christians, we would say that's part of the image of God that we've retained. But there's too many scientists that are even non-believers that are saying like, well, we don't have the answers. I can't remember the name of the individual who was a Nobel Prize winner for discovering radioactive microwave radiation in the background. But he basically said, his quote was, and I don't think he's a believer, but he said, the universe looks oddly like it's been monkeyed with. Yeah. And it's like, and there's just too many scientists that basically either are believers and are saying, look, this is it's astronomical, the odds that anything could have happened without an intelligent designer behind this. Yeah. or they're non-believers that basically say like, look, I don't understand it, but it looks like there's some sort of intelligent,
even Dawkins has
agent.
said we have to constantly remind ourselves, because everything appears so designed, we have to constantly remind ourselves that it wasn't designed. Well, that's interesting.
In that book, The Blind Watchmaker, I think that's one you're quoting.
Yeah.
But it's just funny because it's like, well, it's still funny, even the analogy in the title, The Blind Watchmaker, because there's still like a reference to like a maker of blind.
Right.
Like there's still agents
involved.
He's
trying to spin off of the watchmaker by calling him blind, but he's not denying that he's there.
So there's probably, I mean, it's everywhere though is the thing. Yeah. So there's an awesome book called The Surprising Rebirth of Belief by Justin Brierley, who talks about
love that guy.
Yeah, it's a great book. And then even in the realms of like everything, science, but even in the realms of academic philosophy, like even on the radical centers, like the Maoists and stuff in France, all of them are realizing that their projects are bankrupt. So they're having to return like to the origins of Western values. So you see all these different philosophers like Badiou, like I said, or Zizek, that are basically recapturing Christianity. They want something from it. So they want to retain it. They reject what they don't want. But they're like, well, we need something like, where do we get the idea that human beings are universally valuable?
Right.
Because pagan cultures before
where's this come from?
Yeah. Pagan cultures before Christianity didn't value it. And they're realizing, oh, it's Christianity that actually brought that to the fore. So they go, I'm going to write my essay on Paul and on the importance of the universal subject. They just ignore the fact that there's all that other stuff about Christianity in there. But they try, it's just that everything is, without Christianity, world perspectives, worldviews are bankrupt. And people have to realize it eventually, like I did. Like the scaffolding gets pulled out from under you, and you're either honest.
Yeah, that's right. You're either going to be honest or you're going to continue to just believe your own charade.
Right.
Like Hitchens, right? Like I can see through this, but I'm going to stick with it.
Yep.
So let me ask you this as we start to kind of wrap up here. Former punk, rocker, anarchist, atheist, skinhead, now Christian, right? So I see like all those things kind of have this common thread of rebellion, right? You got to be a bit of a rebel to wear that jacket, right? Or you're a nonconformist, you're a barbarian, right? How do you see the way God wired you and designed you now as a Christian? How does this make you a little bit different? How are you a different Christian than others?
Well, I think, and I don't want to read my experience into the faith necessarily, like this is the way it has to be, but I think Christianity started as a counterculture, and I think authentic Christianity retains that countercultural edge, which is one of the things that attracted me to Men's Alliance. Is like, again, this idea of like you're transformed in your thinking, you're not in the worldly way of thinking. And in order to be a really faithful Christian, especially now in our modern world, you have to be countercultural. Like you can't observe the norms of our current culture and still call yourself a faithful follower of Christ. The valuable thing about Men's Alliance is it brings a lot of guys that are countercultural together so we can support each other in pursuit of that counterculture. And make sure that we're able to do that in a way that's courageous, that's bold, and that drives the kingdom forward.
Yeah. That's awesome. How did you get the call sign Punisher?
I think part of it was my testimony, so if you guys know anything about the Punisher, it's interesting because he was a cop and he was, but part of it was that they just liked the idea of, I was wearing a Marvel shirt. Punisher was one of my favorite characters, I think, because I liked his idea of justice at some point, but,
right.
And then at that point, I was working out a lot more. I had my arms were a lot bigger, so they were teasing me about having the guns. So yeah, Punisher just came out of that confluence of all those different elements.
There's a certain element of that character that is rogue.
Yes.
Right.
He's a vigilante.
That's right. A vigilante.
He's looking for justice, though. He's driven by justice.
Yeah.
And an inherent understanding that in the current system, that's why I like the character, in the current world system, justice isn't possible. So he kind of steps outside and he's countercultural. So it's sort of a metaphor for how we operate, I guess, as believers, but obviously without guns. Well, without guns in the same way that the Punisher used them. Yeah. Right. But you can still like guns. I think that's fine.
All right. Last question. What message would you say to a 2025 version of an 18-year-old you, right? The guy listening to this who's where you were as a teenager.
I understand your need for camaraderie and respect. The only way you're going to find that camaraderie and respect in a way that has lasting value is to find it in a band of brothers like Men's Alliance, where they assent to the truth and understand the relational truth of Jesus. You're going to find out the truth sooner or later, so you might as well just admit it now. Like I said, when you get to it, you're either honest and realize that Christianity is the way, you're dishonest and just delude yourself, and eventually you'll realize you're deluding yourself, or you turn to something that will help you from even realizing that, and become an inebriate one way or another to dull that pain. But it's just easier just to go ahead and become a believer, use that passion for the kingdom, drive the kingdom forward. Why waste your time? I wasted so many years pursuing the wrong path. Don't waste your years.
That's good. Well, thanks for sharing your story, man.
Yeah, it's awesome.
This has been great. I know that it's going to be a message that resonates with men and encourages and sharpens as well.
That's all I want. And like I said, I was hesitant to do it at first because my story is really not that interesting. But so many of the guys in Tribe and stuff were like, "No, you got to go. You got to ask.
Yeah,
and do a podcast." So I was like, "Okay."
Every tribesman has a story.
Yeah,
and I love using this platform to share them.
And I would say that too. Even if people don't have a radical conversion story, that's one thing that I think keeps people silent. Mm-hmm. But I wish I had a testimony like some people, where it's I was always a believer, and then I found Men's Alliance, and it just gave me that courage. I wish that was my story. I wish my story was not. I had to deal with all this garbage to get
totally.
There. Yeah,
totally. Yeah, I think that's a thing we all feel that a lot of people don't understand. Right? It's there was all these wasted years that we look back on with regret, and we're like, I was kind of a knucklehead that went off course and had to be brought back. If I would have been on the right course sooner and started something like this earlier, how much more of an impact could I have had, right? But there's also that acceptance piece of, well, God's got a sovereign plan, and he brought me through all this junk for a reason.
Yeah. And he will use the comfort with which we are comforted to comfort those who need it. So
that's good.
Yeah.
Awesome. Well, thanks, brother.
Yeah, thanks for having me. It's been awesome. It's fun.
And how was your Tribe coffee?
Well, like I said, Tribe coffee is one of those that I actually really enjoy. I've had coffees from other organizations that are like, this is our coffee. And you're like, oh, I wouldn't have put my name on that. But Men's Alliance Tribe coffee is good coffee. Yeah.
Awesome.
To find out more about what we're doing and to join us on our mission, go to men'salliancetribe.com. And don't forget to subscribe to our YouTube channel and give us a 5-star review.